Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Was-sabiquna al-awwaluna minal muhajirin wal ansari wallazina ittaba'uuhum bi ihsanir radiyallahu anhum وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. And as for the foremost among the believers, the first of the emigrants and the helpers, and those who followed them in the best possible manner, Allah is well pleased with them, and they are well pleased with Him. I begin today with a vision, a dream, not seen by me or any other ordinary person, but seen by a man of God. This vision is directly intertwined with our futures. It was 34 years ago that the fourth Khalifa, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad Rahimullah, had a dream. And he describes this dream with the following words. मैंने देखा कि कसरत के साथ सिर्फ पाकिस्तान में नहीं बल्कि दुनिया में दूसरे जगहों पे भी लोगों में जमात की नुसरत की तवज्जो पैदा हो रही है और जिस तरह मौज दर मौज तूफ़ान में लहरें उठती हैं उस तरह लखूखा आदमी जिनका जमात से ताल्लुक़ नहीं है वो जमात की इमदाद के लिए दौरे चले आ रहे हैं। मसलन अमेरिका के मगरिब से भी जो सैन फ्रांसिस्को और लॉस एंजलिस वगैरह का इलाका है उस तरफ से भी लाखों आदमी जमात की मदद के लिए दौरे चले आ रहे हैं। I saw that not only in Pakistan but also in other parts of the world, there is a growing inclination among people to support the Jamaat. And just as waves rise in a storm, wave after wave, similarly, countless people who have no prior connection to the Jamaat are rushing forward to help the Jamaat. For example, even from the western regions of America, such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, and the surrounding areas, even from there, countless people are rushing forward to support the Jamaat. This extraordinary vision was shared again by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz, in a Friday sermon that was delivered at this Baitul Hamid Mosque in 2013. Many of us here may recall sitting in that very same mosque, hearing those words, and feeling the weight of our responsibilities. The message then, as it is now, was clear. That this part of the world, the west coast of the United States, is ripe for a spiritual revolution. But this revolution isn't anything new. Its seeds were sown long before the Jamaat was formally established here. In fact, it began during the time of the promised Messiah ﷺ, who received divine insight about the global impact of his mission. One such revelation states, يَأْتُونَ مِن كُلِّ فَجٍّ أَمِيقٍ. Help will come to you by every distant track. This prophecy beautifully reflects the spread of Ahmadiyyat across the globe. From Qadian, the message of the promised Messiah ﷺ reached even the most distant lands, carried by individuals inspired to share the light of Islam. Among these prophecies is also one that is most dear to us, mentioned by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the sun shall rise from the west. Explaining this prophecy, the promised Messiah ﷺ stated, similarly, the rising of the sun from the west, which will take place, we believe in it. However, what was disclosed to this humble one through a vision is that the sun rising from the west means that the Western countries, which had been engulfed by the darkness of infidelity and ignorance, will be illuminated by the sun of truth, and they will have a share of Islam. Today, I will speak to you about the fulfillment of this prophecy as evidence in the lives and efforts of the pioneers such as Charles Francis Sievewright. His story is deeply intertwined with the spiritual revolution we witness today. Over a century ago, at the age of 34, Mr. Charles embarked on a journey of faith that led him to the threshold of Islam. And 7 years later, he found himself face to face with the promised Messiah ﷺ. He became a torchbearer of truth, an early example of the waves of people inspired by faith and drawn toward the Jamaat from unexpected places. His efforts paved the way for the growth of Ahmadiyyat on the West Coast, laying the foundation upon which we continue to build today. Charles Francis Seabright was a remarkable man of determination and curiosity. Before accepting Islam Ahmadiyyat, he was a member of the Commissioner of the British and Indian Empire League of Australia, and his journeys took him to far-off lands, yet the desire to learn about Islam burned within him. And during one of his travels, while seated with the ambassador of Italy, he expressed his wish to explore Islam further. The ambassador suggested that he visit Cairo, Egypt. However, seated alongside him was Lord Henry Stanley, who was a British lord that embraced Islam during his journeys to the Ottoman Empire. Lord Stanley instead advised that Charles's purpose would be better fulfilled in India. Not long after, Mr. Charles was commissioned to present a petition to the Indian National Congress at its annual conference in Madras. His official purpose was to shed light on the cruelty of the White Australia policy and the restrictions imposed by an immigration act. Yet, unbeknownst to many, his journey also had a deeper spiritual purpose to further the cause of Islam by visiting Islamic societies on his way to Madras. During this tour of India, he came across two companions of the promised Messiah, Islam, who were in Lahore, Mian Mirajuddin Umar Sahib and Hakim Nur Muhammad Ahmadi Sahib, who convinced Charles to learn more about Islam by visiting Qadian. They explained that this sect of Islam was led by the promised Messiah and Imam Mahdi himself. He wasn't so far either. Charles could actually visit him to inquire more. In spite of many opponents of Ahmadiyyat discouraging Charles from visiting Qadian, Charles was drawn to this opportunity to meet the Messiah. And so he began his journey to the small village. He arrived just in time to join the Maghrib prayers. Now, what unfolded next can only be captured from his own words. Let's take a moment to reflect on a pivotal exchange that occurred in 1903 in the small village of Qadian. This was a meeting between Charles, an Australian convert to Islam, and a man of God, the Imam Mahdi and promised Messiah Islam, sent to unite humanity in the latter days under the banner of Islam. Now, for many of us, it's hard to put into words what we would say if we ever saw the promised Messiah Islam before our very own eyes. Charles's own words reflect the awe that he felt. He says, "Nothing astonished me more among all the extraordinary incidents during my missionary travels than the finding of myself in that sacred place, face to face with its Messiah. Eventually, when I was presented to him and eyes looked into eyes, he knew me to be Abdul Haqq, the slave of truth. And I knew him to be divinely appointed one to call the true believers, the faithful, together again to make the world safer of Islam. Soul spoke to soul through spirit, after Allah has joined them by the means of the miraculous meeting." The profoundness of this encounter is immeasurable. The conversation that ensued between these two men in the humble hamlet of Qadian over 100 years ago carries lessons so deep that stacks and stacks of books can be written on the discourse that took place. Today, I will only share 3 parts of the conversation to give you a true insight on the inquisitive soul of Charles Seabright, now known as Abdul Haqq, and the insightful and blessed tongue of the promised Messiah Islam. At its core, this story highlights the critical need for tarbiyat and how the promised Messiah Islam provides such profound tarbiyat to Abdul Haqq that it not only transforms him spiritually, but also empowers him to embark on a devoted path of tabligh. That is a transformation we should all aspire to, a faith so strong that our very actions inspire those around us to see something extraordinary in us, a reflection of our beliefs. This first part of the conversation reveals how Abdul Haqq's spiritual journey found fulfillment in Qadian. Abdul Haqq shared his immediate impression with the promised Messiah Islam. He said, "I am naturally inclined towards spiritual union. This is what I yearn for and desire to fully experience it. Ever since I entered Qadian, I have felt that my heart is at peace, and every person that I have met so far in Qadian seems as if he were an old acquaintance of mine." The promised Messiah Islam responded beautifully. "It is God's nature of law that every soul requires a body, and when its body is ready, the soul is blown into it automatically. It is important for you to gradually become familiar with the verities that God Almighty has revealed unto me." The promised Messiah Islam further said, "There are many errors in the beliefs spread among the general Muslims, and these errors have come from the association of Christians. However, now, God Almighty desires to show the pure and illuminated face of Islam to the world. Purification of doctrine is necessary for spiritual progress. The purer the doctrine, the more progress there will be." Take a moment to process the insight that was being shared to Abdul Haqq. Today, you can go to the same India and visit graves of saints and see how Muslims, yes, Muslims are bowing before the graves in clearly shirk-inspired gestures. This is just one of countless impurities that have seeped into Muslims from across the globe. What Islam would we be sharing if it is infused with shirk? That was lesson number 1. Improve your understanding of Islam by embracing the promised Messiah Islam. For Allah said, "I shall cause thy message to reach the corners of the earth." Thy message. Think about that. This understanding led to a transformative conversation, one so deep and impactful that it reshaped Abdul Haqq's spiritual journey. Among the many insights he shared, the second part of this conversation I want to highlight is how Abdul Haqq reflected on the unexpected blessing of standing right before the very presence of the promised Messiah Islam. He said, "After coming here, I have come to know that those who I had been in search of are here. I had heard about you in Rangoon and had seen some of your writings, but I did not know of your whereabouts, nor did I expect to be here so soon." The promised Messiah Islam then beautifully responded, "Hearing this, my intuition testifies that you will agree to our terms, and God willing, will also be able to accept our influence. However, remember, man is successful in attaining grace through 2 ways: by spending his time in a prophet's company, and by continuously listening to his words. He should not conceal any doubts, for doubts have a potentially fatal effect, which penetrates deeply and becomes the means of one's destruction. Many are ruined by this." It wouldn't be a surprise on the response of Abdul Haqq. He said to the promised Messiah Islam, "I consider the very conditions that you have mentioned for entering your Jamaat as conditions for Islam. Anyone who becomes a Muslim must make these conditions his goal." Let's reflect on 2 points that are worth mentioning here. First, it's especially important for our youth, who should understand that if doubts arise, turn to the source for clarity. Never conceal your doubts. We have the opportunity to write to our Khalifa for guidance. Discussing uncertainties with those who can't provide you any answers only leads to more confusion. Let's protect ourselves from misguidance by fostering a strong, living relationship with Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz. Secondly, this is a chance for us to reflect on the 10 conditions of Bai'at, just as Abdul Haqq did. Have we read them? How many of those conditions have we strive to inculcate in our lives? To a Muslim ever engrossed in search for true Islam, The 10 conditions of Bai'at are a God-sent summary for all of Islam. And as Abdul Haqq said, anyone who becomes a Muslim must make these conditions his goal. Building on this reflection, the third point that I wish to share from this conversation is the deeper discussion that Abdul Haqq had with the promised Messiah Islam about the Holy Quran. After hearing a translation of the Holy Quran prepared by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih I Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, Abdul Haqq passionately highlighted the urgent need for an accurate translation of the Holy Quran, as many had been misled by flawed versions. The promised Messiah Islam agreed, but he also stressed the importance of commentary to go along with translations so as to fully convey its meaning. The promised Messiah Islam gave an example that without commentary, it would be impossible for Muslims to understand that غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ is actually a warning. That like the Jews who rejected Jesus Islam, the Muslim Ummah would face God's wrath for denying the promised Messiah Islam. Deeply inspired, Abdul Haqq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu prayed to play a role in its vital endeavor of the true translation and understanding of the Holy Quran, benefiting both Muslims and Christians alike. Now today we stand witness to the need of all Muslims to unite. And little do they know, Allah Almighty has placed a prayer in Surah Al-Fatiha, a prayer we learned as children, that would fulfill their desire to unite by being those who accept the promised Messiah Islam. That's why it's so much more important for us to better our understanding of the Holy Quran so that we too can share the true essence of the Quran with our friends. That's exactly what Abdul Haqq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu did. In the end, Abdul Haqq eventually completed his work in India and continued on for more work, which led him to travel to UK, France, Italy, Spain, and a short 3 years in Fresno, California, before finally settling in New Zealand in 1906. And at this time, he wrote a very important article, as the promised Messiah Islam foreshadowed. It was published during the life of the promised Messiah Islam in the Review of Religions, titled 10 Years in Islam. And here he openly declared, I am professedly a follower of the Apostle Muhammad and have become a member of the Ahmadiyyat Society of Qadian, so as to be associated with the most advanced section of Muslim students of all important religions in the world, as well as to be united to a very active Muhammadan missionary society for spreading of Islamic knowledge. This was the moment that the world knew Mr. Charles Francis Seabright as Hazrat Muhammad Abdul Haqq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, a humble disciple. Hazrat Muhammad Abdul Haqq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, a humble disciple of the promised Messiah Islam. And just 2 years later, his master, the promised Messiah Islam, was called to his Lord. Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. Thereafter, Hazrat Abdul Haqq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu moved to Los Angeles around the time of World War I in 1914. And as we know, in 1920, the first missionary to America, Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, arrived in the United States. It was here that Hazrat Muhammad Abdul Haqq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu reconnected and furthered his work for Islam. He states, thus did I manifest the principle, I must cooperate before God can operate. After the advent in America of Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, I have further fulfilled my pledge to associate with the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam and have been active in assisting its first missioner for many months past to gain a footing in these disunited states. During this time, he remained the lamp of Islam for the West Coast under the guidance of Hazrat Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Radiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu. He remained actively engaged with local residents, even being mentioned in 2 newspapers at the time, the Los Angeles Examiner and the Long Beach Daily News. As an example of his remarkable tabligh work in Los Angeles, on one occasion, he was recognized as a local minister of the Muhammadan faith. Hazrat Abdul Haqq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu humbly and actively participated in the spreading of Islam and Ahmadiyyat, continuing his efforts to propagate the faith through lectures and writings. His appeal was not for personal glory, but for the glorification of Allah. This reflects a profound truth for all of us, that serving the Jamaat is not about seeking titles or recognition or any worldly gain. It's an unparalleled blessing and favor upon Allah to us. A sacred trust that demands sincerity and humility. His lasting dedication was evident in his appeal to Muslims and non-Muslims alike, calling for cooperation in furthering the cause of Islam and peace. One of his most famous writings in the Muslim Sunrise was his article entitled, "We Must Cooperate Before God Can Operate." In this, he explains the efforts we must all make as individuals and as a society to start in order for God to bless those efforts. And eventually, it was in 1934 that Hazrat Abdul Haqq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu passed away. It took almost another 100 years before his grave was discovered. By the grace of Allah, he is the only known Sahabi of the promised Messiah ﷺ, buried here in the United States. And it reminds me of a very profound statement made by the late Nazir Ahmad Ali Sahib, who was a pioneering missionary to Sierra Leone. When he addressed the people of Qadian before his departure, he said, "Death is inevitable. If any one of us dies over there, then you should bear in mind that in a faraway place, a piece of land has come under the permanent occupation of Ahmadiyyat. It will thus be incumbent on the Ahmadi youth to reach that soil and fulfill the purpose for which we have occupied that land in the shape of our graves." Hazrat Abdul Haqq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu is buried in the Forest Lawn Glendale Cemetery in Los Angeles, just 50 miles from where we're sitting today. Many here have visited the site, and I encourage those who haven't to do so. It's quite amazing that a Sahabi of the Prophet of our age is buried in our very own city, and it behooves us all to visit and pay a respect and offer prayer for him. It's by the grace of Allah that the unwavering dedication and sacrifices of Hazrat Abdul Haqq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu and the early Sahaba of the promised Messiah ﷺ have brought us here to gather for the 37th time, year after year, and still I hear many refer to this blessed Jalsa as intimate and small. Therefore, while we do see Jamaat blooming, prospering, and growing, the vision of Hazrat Khalifa Rabi Rahimullah remains very far from fulfilled. Remember, he described waves upon waves of people with no prior connection to the Jamaat rushing forward to support it. So many, in fact, that Khalifa Rabi Rahimullah later in that sermon said that he exclaimed, "Bas kafi hogi, bas karo, itni zaroor nahi." That's it. It's enough, no more. There's no need for this many. And when I look at the audience, it's evident that we have much work to do to even reach a fraction of this remarkable vision. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih V, Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz, in that Friday sermon 10 years ago, in this very mosque, reminded us of the critical importance of this mission. He reaffirmed the inevitable triumph of Ahmadiyyat as the true Islam and emphasized that the promised Messiah ﷺ's mission to establish God's unity and spread of Islam will prevail through divine support. Reflecting on his interview with the Los Angeles Times, Hazur Ayyadullah Ta'ala bin Nasr al-Aziz expressed confidence in Jamaat's ability to win hearts worldwide. He urged us to pair our efforts of tabligh with taqwa, moral excellence, and a steadfast commitment to honoring sacrifices of those who came before us. This call to action resonates with the pioneering spirit of Hazrat Abdul Haqq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who laid the foundation of Ahmadiyyat in the west coast of USA. His dedication and timeless words, "We must cooperate before God can operate," remind us that divine support comes when we work tirelessly and selflessly to spread the message of Islam. Inspired by both the Khalifa's guidance and Abdul Haqq's legacy, we must rise to fulfill our responsibilities with fervor and sacrifice, paving the way for spiritual revolution. Our beloved Hazrat Muslim Maud Radhiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu wrote on the inaugural issue of the Muslim Sunrise in 1921, he wrote, "The pioneers in the colonization of an American land are always looked back upon with great honor and respect. Their work was temporal, but now, my dear brothers and sisters, Allah the Almighty has made you the pioneers in the spiritual colonization of the Western world. If you will work with the same love, zeal, sincerity, and loyalty as they did, your honor and respect and name will still be greater than theirs, as you will have, moreover, the reward at the last day and Allah's pleasure, the grandeur and beauty of which no one can estimate in this world." As we reflect on the pioneering spirit of Hazrat Abdul Haqq Radhiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, who left his Christian faith to embrace Islam, journeyed across the world to meet the Messiah, and brought the message of Ahmadiyyat to this west coast of America, we must ask ourselves, how will we contribute to the spiritual revolution of the West Coast? Will we witness those crashing waves of converts? What are we doing to spread the message of Islam in the West? Have we invited our friends and colleagues to the mosque? Have we written to newspapers? Have we distributed literature or volunteered at the tabligh stalls? If not that, then does our conduct silently summon others to Islam? I can't help but think about our dear brother, Mabrur Saqib, who passed away just 3 years ago at the young age of 31 years old. It's hard to put in the words the loss we feel. But what struck me the most was the reaction of his coworkers. When I shared the news with them, they didn't just say kind words. They spoke from the heart. His manager told me how Mabrur had such exceptional manners and what a privilege it was to work with him. He talked about how he was so excited to come to this mosque right here in Chino, and how he was traveling to Maryland at the mosque over there for a conference just 2 weeks ago. And hearing this made me wonder, what kind of legacy am I leaving? Are we living our lives in a way that even without words shows others the beauty of Islam? Mabrur didn't just live his faith, he embodied it in such a way that those around him couldn't help but notice it in his behavior, in his smile. He kept that same smile, whether he was doing waqar amal here or working in an operating room. My dear guests of the Promised Messiah Islam, I pray that Allah enables us to honor the legacy of the Sahaba of the Promised Messiah Islam by emulating their spirit and sacrifice. May Allah elevate the status of Hazrat Abdul Haqq Radhiyallahu Ta'ala Anhu and our brother Mabrur Saqib in heaven. Ameen.